Well, Greg, it's really good to meet you, man.
Oh, pleasure to be here.
You was one of the first films that when Britflicks started back in 2006, that yours was one of the films of Plague. It's made for, a pittance really, wasn't it? Can you tell us a little bit about that film? And
Yeah, I mean, my first feature, I was 22 years old. It was made for $3,500. I did that thing that they always tell you not to do. Don't go and make a film on a credit card or borrow money. That's exactly what I did. I got a credit card, borrowed money of friends, and The Plague was inspired by the group of friends I grew up with, but also really came to life by the kind of untrained talent that I worked with, the real kind of raw actors. And I just wanted to tell my story of me and my friends growing up, and it was nuts to think how far The Plague was such a launch pad for me, and it makes me feel old now thinking back how long ago that was. But yes, kind of set me on a good path, and it was one of the first films before things like Bullet Boy, Kid Adulthood, before that whole kind of urban wave of British cinema. The Plague was really one of those earliest films, and was one of the earliest films to ever be released online as well. So yeah, it was a big learning curve for me, that project, and I still think, the projects I make now, I have a similar voice, but I've really developed as a filmmaker from that early 20 kind of naive filmmaker.
And did it earn enough money to pay your credit card off?
It did actually, just about. It made enough money. The fact it was made for $3,500, the BBC obviously bought the TV rights. The distributor did go bust on it. Obviously it first came out around 2004, its cinematic release was around 2006. I ended up actually bootlegging and selling my own copies of the film. So I actually pirated my own film. Not that I
That's great.
Yeah, I don't encourage piracy, but when the director himself is selling it for a $5, I did make the money back. So yeah, it meant I could keep on making films.
And did it open doors for you?
Definitely opened a lot of doors. I mean, someone joked that I made The Plague to get a foot into the door, and actually what The Plague did was literally kick the door off the hinges. It did major festivals, some big filmmakers, everyone from Mike Leigh to Hugh Hudson to Sandy Leverson kind of knew about me and hyped me up. The press was fantastic. So it was great as a young filmmaker in the early 20s. Obviously there's a downside to that. When I was making it, I was still signing on. I was unemployed during the day and then going to red carpet events in the night. So there was kind of like getting my head around that, and being in my early 20s, like so much happened with it. I probably wasn't in the right place as a young person to deal with all that, but you can't look back with any regrets. It was a great learning curve, and it's taught me a lot about the film industry. And the biggest thing is I've just kept going. I've never given up, and I think in this industry, like with all creative industries, it's actually about keep on persevering and not giving up.
Did you have a distribution deal in place when you made it, or you completed the film and then you just sort of touted it around?
No, The Plague was made for nothing, and we just started doing the festival circuit with no distribution, and it was doing quite big festivals and getting really good kind of critical response. It did the London Film Festival, and we still had no distributor. In 2005, it experimented. It was the second ever feature film to be released online. At the time, we were told that no one would ever distribute films on the internet. We got about 150 downloads, which for 2005 is probably quite good, considering that the technology wasn't there for people to stream it. But then in 2006, the BBC bought the TV rights, and an independent distributor did a cinematic and DVD release. And then, like I say, I then ended up putting it out myself through my own kind of imprint called Broke But Making Films.
So then you say it opened doors for you. Was you suddenly then earning money as a filmmaker?
I was doing like music videos. So my bread and butter around the time of The Plague was doing music videos for Benjamin Zephaniah. Was one of the biggest artists who I did 4 videos off his album. So Benjamin actually helped me become self-employed, and ended up doing a lot of teaching work, working with young people, working with like disadvantaged young people in pupil referral units, because I was a young filmmaker myself, and the stories and the tales, I guess, The Plague looked at of inner city lives was very relatable to a lot of young people. So that kind of got me into that area of work, which is something I'm very passionate about, how cinema and filmmaking is such an incredible medium for expressing and telling stories that we can actually reach a lot of vulnerable youth. So yeah, a lot of work came from it, but it's nothing I could say, oh, I earned X amount of money, or I had a moment where it was like, I felt like I had made it. I don't think you ever really feel that in the industry. I think there's moments where you have highs and lows, and the highs when there's lots of press, everyone that knows you thinks you're popping off. But the reality of it is, like I said earlier, it's about perseverance. It's about building a career and kind of the long goal.
Did you have any formal training?
I went to art school and studied film in Farnham, which was like a hands-on production course. So actually, this was just around the time of the digital revolution. So I had learnt digital, but also learnt to shoot on film and cut with film. So I was using Steenbecks, cutting and splicing 16mm. But to be honest, I started teaching myself around the age of 14. I got a home video camera, and I used to put my dad and all my family in films, and I used to press play on the video camera and run it into an old VHS machine and would pause and record. So I edited it all on domestic equipment. But what that meant is, if you know anything about pause and record, if you leave it longer than 2 minutes, it comes off and it leaves a glitch. So I would have to cut an entire short film, like a 15-minute film, in one sitting. So if I needed the toilet, I'd have to pause and record, line up my next cut on the camera, run to the toilet, go to the toilet, come back, and then do the next edit. And if I missed that window of opportunity, I'd have to recut the entire film. So I'd say the discipline towards editing and filmmaking, was something I was learning around 14 and 15, just from doing it all myself with domestic equipment.
Cool. That's pretty inspirational.
Cool.
You've got another film coming out soon. It's probably your biggest film to date.
Definitely, yeah.
You've waited a long time for it to actually hit the shelves to be released. How did it come about? How did you get involved in directing Bonded by Blood 2?
Bonded by Blood 2 was literally after my fourth feature, which I crowdfunded, a film called Communion. We got a friend of mine, a really good actor called Nick Nevin, who had, you probably know Nick, who I had known about myself from my first feature, The Plague. Nick, people know him as a big Snapchat star and a big actor, but Nick is also an old school graffiti writer, and amongst the hip hop community he's really well known. So Nick and myself, we've known about each other from MySpace and The Plague. That's how long we've known each other. I got Nick to be in Communion, just to have a little cameo, just to help have another face in it. Nick, actors like Lee Ingleby and Roger Griffiths, all worked on that film for free. And off the back of that, I then was offered a commercial project, firstly with a producer called Simon Phillips. I was approached to do a film about a bank robbery, which got missold as a hooligan film called Dangerous Mind of a Hooligan. But its original title was This Is a Robbery. The film did quite well. It was put out through Signature, sold a lot of units, and from that project, Jonathan Sothcott then saw that and invited me in. I went and had coffee with Jonathan and with Neil Jones at the time. And originally we spoke about doing a project. I kind of gave him a treatment. It was something called Trappers. It was like an urban, a bit maybe like The Plague, but it never kind of really took off. And then suddenly Jonathan just called me after a few weeks and said, look, Bonded by Blood 2, the money's here to make it. I know we spoke about something else. Would you consider reading the script and taking it on board? And I said I'd read it, and I wanted to work with Jonathan. I kind of liked, I got a lot of time for these guys that in the independent British home entertainment world. These guys that can raise money and get films on the shop shelf and to an audience. That model amazes me, especially as an indie filmmaker from my background. So I kind of wanted to be involved with Jonathan and with that setup and just, that world of straight to DVD genre kind of work. And it was a great opportunity. It was the biggest budget, the biggest crew. With projects like that, I was a director for hire. So there's also an understanding that, there's leeway with what the producers want, what the distributors want. What I find is that the distributors and the producers, they want to know, they want to put some key stars in there. They want to control the title and the posters of it. But apart from that, you're actually given a lot of freedom. And that was really where I had a lot of fun. That actually on set, working with the actors, the way I shot the film, the way I put the film together, I was given a lot of freedom. So, you know, the biggest thing, my dad always said to me, if you dig holes for a living and someone says to you, I'll pay you to come dig a hole over here, you're not going to turn your nose up to it and go, well, I only dig these holes. Of course, you're going to go and do the job. So for me, I'm always thankful for an opportunity to kind of develop my craft. So it's a great opportunity to do Bonded by Blood 2. And from that, there's many great people, crew and cast that I'm still working with today.
Did you have an input into the casting process?
Yes, so the casting was one of the first things we actually did. You know, I got offered the gig, and then about a week later I went to a casting with brilliant Lee Mountjoy, fantastic casting director, and with Jonathan. You know, Jonathan's great. Obviously, it is a Jonathan Softcott film, but he was open to some of my suggestions. And to be honest, together, me and him kind of banded the names around, and we kind of put that main cast together. And we were both very happy with it. And, you know, I think it comes across in the film that there's some great actors and some fantastic kind of realistic performances in this project.
Would he be a producer you'd work for again?
We'll have to see. Jonathan's off doing many different things. I've got a few other projects that I'm lining up. Obviously, never would say never to anything, never would turn things down. But, you know, Jonathan and Hereford Films are doing their projects. So we'll see. Maybe I'll get offered Bonded by Blood 3. Who knows? But, you know, I don't want to spend my career, as you know, from films like The Plague, has been very colourful, and I do many different things. And this, for me, is one stepping stone. I'm only 36. I'm what's considered a young director, really. I've got 6 feature films under my belt. So for me, this was a stepping stone. It was about working with a big crew, working with projects that are going to go straight out to an audience via a decent distributor. So, you know, I do love British gangster stuff. I love that kind of things. But I do want to push on and try different things and really let my, you know, spread my wings with other projects. So we'll see.
I mean, it was a step up for you as a director. Did you ever feel under pressure, or did you just revel in it? You really enjoyed it?
I mean, it was a very pressured project, to be honest. I mean, even Neil and Jonathan said to me, I think on the last day, they went, that was an impossible schedule. We can't believe you did it. And they said that's one of the most smoothest films we've ever worked on. So it was, you know, for 3 weeks we had a lot to shoot. There was a lot on. So, but thankfully the amazing cast and the amazing crew, you know, the crew members that never get really a lot of credit, they were the guys putting in ridiculous hours and making the project happen. So there was a bit of pressure in terms of timing, weather, all those things that every production has to deal with. But, you know, it was nice people to work for, so there was no pressure on that side of things. The pressure was, for me, you know, it's a genre that people might not associate myself with, but I wanted to bring something really special to it. So the only real pressure was what I was putting myself under. I didn't want to just, you know, just shoot shot, reverse shot, not just do it as a walk in the park. I wanted to try and really get the best shots I could and the best performances I could and work with what I had and just get the best out of it. So it was really about putting myself under pressure to try and make the best film possible, to be honest.
I like the Mr. X character, Mark Harris, and I like the narration, you know. It just seemed to add something to the film for me, and there were some lovely shots involved in him as well.
Yeah.
Was that part of your ideas, or was that put on the table and said, right, we want to do this? Or?
No, that was entirely kind of my vision for it, really. For me, Bonded by Blood 2, I mean, it sits within the Bonded by Blood franchise through the fact that it has this Mr. X character speaking with Bernie's character played by Johnny Palmiro. So the film itself is about telling and retelling of myths. So I love this idea. You know, the Range Rover murders are like a modern folklore for the British working class. It's like Robin Hood. The amount of films and just the myths around it. And then the fact this script and the story was about a character telling another character about this story, it was constantly about retelling and telling of stories. So I wanted to bring a very bold and very punchy, almost comic book kind of visual style to it, to complement the fact that it's about the retelling of myths. So especially with Mr. X, because he was named as Mr. X, I could have a lot of fun with that in how I showed him and how I revealed him. But yeah, throughout the vision was very clear. I wanted it to be as artistic and as punchy and just make the storytelling as creative as possible, which I think lacks a lot in a lot of these kind of Essex Boys films. That they're just knocked out, but there's actually not much time is spent in getting the visuals and understanding the film language. And that was something I was kind of really passionate about for this.
And how was it like working with all the cast?
Yeah, the cast it was a fantastic cast. I'm someone who I love to rehearse and love to spend as much time kind of directing actors, not on set, actually doing that in a rehearsal room. The producers were very helpful in that they allowed me to be able to, I did a big group workshop where I got all the actors to come in and we played with the characters, and then did some individual kind of rehearsals where we looked at specific scenes. And it just meant when it came to shooting that all the background work, all those relationships, there was more layers there. So I was very, really happy with the performances. There were some key actors that really kind of made it for me. I mean, George Russo and Sam Strike. To me, even though everyone knows like Tony Tucker and this whole Range Rover murders, is actually bonded by blood too. The new generation of Essex Boys is this amazing story about the murder of Dean Boschel with Damon Albarn and Ricky Percival. So for me, it's about getting that relationship between those friends and between those characters. And almost as a counterpoint, even though the visuals were very much comic book style, I wanted the performances not to be this glitz and glamour that's often associated with British gangster films. And it's kind of untrue. That's not, we never see these people go home and go to bed at night and see them as real people. And for me, being given this opportunity, it was making sure Dean and Damon and Ricky, they came across as real people. And I was very lucky that some of the main performers in there really helped anchor that and bring that across.
Yeah, there was some really, really good performances in it. And, it just carried the film. There was so many good performances that, I was really, really overwhelmed by it. I wasn't expecting it to be such a great movie, to be honest.
A lot of that comes down to as well, like I would give actors, and that's how I work, I give them freedom. And Simon Cluett, I should say, the writer, kind of knew my short film Bruised, so was very excited about me kind of directing the script. And he had said to me, do your thing, come on, I'm not precious as a writer, which was great. And then obviously the producers allowed me that freedom. So I was able to pass that freedom on to the actors. But then it comes down to what the actors bring to the table. Sam Strike really went to town on Dean's character. But, someone I have to really kind of bring up is George Russo's performance as Damon was, there's bits in it that the audience won't know. There's scenes where George is playing and he has a real knife in his pocket and his hand's on his pocket. And I remember him telling me and Sam afterwards that he was like, his hand was gripping that knife like it was going to do him. And there were scenes where, where there was a scene between George, Sam and Josh. And just before we were about to do a take, George leant across and he showed Sam something he'd written on paper and then told him not to say anything. And Josh was like, being Josh as well, Josh was like, what's that about? He wanted to get in on the joke, but George wouldn't let him. And it just created a dynamic where George and Sam, as actors, had some kind of power over Josh's character. And it's little tricks like that's when you've got a really great actor. And me and George really went to town in terms of our references. Obscure references from films like Irreversible to obvious references like Scarface. And one of the fact Damon has a little scar over his eye is again something George, as a nod to that film, kind of came with. So, a director is only as good as the crew I work with, and I'm only as good as the actors I work with. So I can give them that freedom, but it's about what they bring to it. So I was very lucky and very blessed to have a great cast.
Yeah. There's a lot of humour in it as well, aren't there? Some really funny humour. I mean, one of my favourite scenes is when they're all sitting around the table about how they're going to get revenge on Tony Denham.
Yeah.
And one of the guys says about a hand grenade. And like George just comes in and says, "We're going to get a fucking egg grenade from," and it really is funny. I mean, it's just a cracking movie.
Yeah, and I think with films like this, with British gangster stuff, you know, everyone loves like the gore and the glamour, but actually how these films work is the humour. And again, I guess it's about finding the core of those real characters. They're just guys in a pub talking, and just they're only known because of this murder. I guess in the same way as like Pat Tate and Tony Tucker, they're only known because of the Range Rover murders. They could have just been normal working class guys working in clubs doing this stuff and sat in pubs, and you wouldn't know them to walk past them. And I think that, you know, for me that was really important. It was just about making them real, and that humour does come across in the film, and there's lots of laughs in there. And I think it's really important, with, like I say, with projects like this, that they're real people. And you know, in some respects I always say there's no such thing as a comedy, because in real life we're always cracking jokes, even when in some of our most darkest times, we're always telling jokes. So yeah, it was, but I was very lucky. Like I say, the cast, people really bonded on set, and it made those friendships feel really real as well.
And because it was a true story, or you know, based on a true story, you know, you've got witness protection program, you've got people in prison, and you've got someone dead, or a couple of people dead. Did that have did you sort of take that on board? Did it have a sort of an effect on how you dived to the film?
I mean, my approach to it, and you know, you could debate whether this is right or wrong, was obviously, you know, there's like the first film as well. So to deal with that, there was like the Tony Tucker returning character, and then there was so that was all based on real life. Then there's this whole the issue, did Ricky Percival do it or not? That's based on real life, based on, you know, all from Bernie's book. Now, my attitude to it was, firstly, there's not much I can do with the older characters returning, because everyone knows them from the first film. So as a director, there's no point in me, you know, sitting down with Terry Stone going, "Oh, what I want to do with the characters, this and that." They know their characters. So what I wanted to focus on was the new characters and really the story that the film is based on. Now, I could have got bogged down in trying to make it real and authentic and doing lots of research, but the great thing about this film is it does also pose that, did Damon do it or didn't he do it? And actually you could read it as, was it actually Ricky that did the murder? Did Damon do the murder? So I think I wanted to have that freedom, not to feel that we're going to make a film to try and hopefully get someone out of prison, or, you know, that this could be used as a campaign. That really it's a story about the retelling and telling of myths. Whether they're true or not is, you know, myths they go beyond truth. So for me, I guess I gave myself that freedom of going, you know what, it's not about making a biopic. It's about telling a great story that is based in reality, but no one actually knows the truth of it, like with the Range Rover murders. So I kind of used that flexibility for myself, to be flexible and not be constrained by saying this has to be exactly accurate to the real life events.
Well, that's Bonded by Blood too. Can you tell us a little bit about now and the future?
Yeah, so at the moment, I've got some really exciting stuff planned for the future. Off the back of Bonded by Blood 2, obviously, you know, when people see it, I think my relationship as a director with one of the key leads, George Russo, will really come across from that film. I think we did something very special with that. And it was really fantastic meeting George on set. I guess we were kind of like kindred spirits slightly in our taste of films, in our frames of references, just where we were as human beings. You know, what was great was actually we discovered we lived really close to each other, and off the back of Bonded, we started meeting up for coffee, just catching up with each other, and then started writing together. It's been a couple of years since Bonded by Blood 2 was finished, and from then since now, myself and George and a producer called Stuart Malcolm Honey, we've set up a company called Medium Cool Films, and also with our financial director Spencer Hall. So we've just set up a production company. We've got a slate of projects, 5 features and a TV series. I don't want to say too much on camera about stuff, because I never like saying too much online, because whenever you say something it generally curses it. But we got some exciting stuff. We're trying to raise money for our first project, which is something that's very close to my heart, very close to George's heart. We've got an incredible cast attached to it so far. We're just trying to get it's the classic story. We're trying to get the money in place. Touch wood, we'll be shooting it by the end of this year. But yeah, got some exciting things up my sleeve. Some gritty, what you can expect from a Greg Hall kind of film, but some genre stuff in there. And a new level of work. The collaboration between me and George, as people will maybe get a taster from Bonded by Blood 2, that is just a taster. We planted some more seeds and there's some lovely fruit that's going to be reaped from it with these future projects. So keep an eye out for Medium Cool Films. We're under the radar a little bit, but I assure you, the next few months, this next year, things will be announced and will come from us.
We'll keep us posted.
Without a doubt, you'll be the first to know.
Hopefully we can come down for a set visit because it'll be exciting. So great, really nice
Brilliant.
to meet you.
Thank you, John.
For talking to us.
Pleasure. Cheers.
Lovely. Cheers, mate.
Cool.